You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
This looks creepy. What is going on? Ew.
So hello, Chris. Yes, this is a little promo video from a game coming out for, I think, the Oculus called the Here Lay Lie. Actually, it's PlayStation VR.
Oh,
And,
man, that looks nasty.
Yeah. So I'm going to immediately jump into this next one, which is Wilson's Heart. That'll be available for the Oculus. Oops, I actually started playing. Here we go. Okay, why are we not working? There we go.
When your
So it
day
appears
is over,
that,
the mystery,
or maybe
is
it's just myself,
beginning.
I've selected two
The
kind
time
of
of
scary
simply
themes. The
controlling
other
a
one is kind of
character
surreal.
is over.
I read a little blurb on it that
Don't
gives
just
you
play
remember
the story.
Jacob's ladder and things like that. It's
Star
supposed to
in
give you
it.
unsettling visions.
Welcome to
You
a
can see
world
with
where
this
mystery
one.
surrounds you, and the characters are not who they seem. Step into the shoes of Robert Wilson as you use new and exciting controls to interact with a suspenseful environment in a narrative that... Starring Peter Weller as Robert Wilson, Rosario Dawson as Elsa Wolcott, Alfred Molina as Bela Blasco, and introducing you, Wilson's Heart, coming in 2017.
So that's what we had to look forward to. Actually, there are a ton of VR implemented games coming out. Arkham, or Gotham Arkham, or whatever it's called, from Batman. And
Oh, is there a Batman game coming? I haven't even gotten to delve in all the E3 events. I've been this week. It's just been super busy, and I haven't really been able to even really pay attention to all the stuff that happened. I got the little tidbits from Nintendo and a little bit of the PlayStation VR stuff that we're going to talk about, but there was so much. I mean, E3 is such a big show, and unless you go, it's impossible to see it all. So
yeah, well, as mentioned, I watched the keynote from Sony. Obviously, the PlayStation VR, which you'll talk about a little later, had a huge announcement. Or actually, we've known it's been coming. I knew from GDC that it was coming. However, they actually have a date now. They had already determined the price, which, if I remember correctly, was $399 for the VR system, which undercuts both the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive. And more importantly, if you've already got a PlayStation 4, this thing will work with it. So you don't need a hefty machine. Some people complain that for that price, they've made some cuts, but other people think, no, it's a pretty good experience. They use these little light bulbs for their hand controllers, and they also have these illuminations on the headset itself. I've heard good things about the comfort of the headset itself. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty cool. But there are a number of games that are being, I don't know if ported is the right word for it, or will be available exclusively on the PlayStation 4. As I mentioned, there'll be a not kind of like a chapter of the Batman series. And some people were trying to identify when that actually would be in the series itself. I haven't actually played any of the games, so I don't know. And then what's the Final Fantasy, I guess, has a version coming out that people were nauseated with. What's that big series that I think has been exclusive on Sony? It's kind of a horror genre as well. I can't think of it right now. If it comes
Not
to
The
me
Last
later
of
on.
Us.
No, that was more of a survivor. Um,
Oh, Resident Evil.
Yes, thank you. So there's a
Resident Evil
Evil.
VR coming. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is going to be creepy.
Well, yeah, somebody actually got a chance to play it and felt nauseated by it. He wasn't the only one, so they're probably going to have to fine tune that. He wasn't very excited about the Batman. They weren't really as immersive, and the gameplay wasn't very good. And there's another one too. So there's several out there that are going to be brought over, but some people think they might be pushing it too quickly. I personally don't know. So, Mr. Chris, what else do you got to say? What do we got going on?
Well, welcome everybody. It's All Things 3D today, week in review. Today is June 17th, 2016. And yeah, we're just going to talk about everything that happened this week, lots of stuff. I mean, we've got like 3D printed buses to talk about. We've got huge data sets of scanned object. We've got It Sees 3D. Mike's going to give us an update on his OSVR saga, which I'm sure he can't wait to tell us all about. And obviously the PlayStation VR. And then, as usual, you stick around to the end, and the Print Whisperer, I'll tell you a little tip, what I learned over the week, doing 3D printing every day, so I've always got little things that I'm learning every week, and I'm just going to share that info with you, and I'll tell you that towards the end of the show.
Sounds great. I always can't wait for your little tip. It's the mind moving in the morning.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel a little tired, but I've actually had more sleep the night before show than I've had in a while. So maybe
isn't that weird? You get more sleep and you feel more tired.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
Maybe it just takes a little bit.
That's
Okay.
always for me.
So as you know, the main theme of today is, hey, what's going on in these light towers from the HTC, or the lighthouses from HTC Vive, and why can they make them so cheap? As you know, the entire price of the HTC Vive is, I think, wasn't it $799 if I remember correctly? About $800. So obviously somebody would correct me if I get it wrong, but I think it was about that much. And we talked about in the last show that titled "You Get What You Pay For," and in reality, both the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive have a lot of technology and a lot of new technology, advanced technology, and you kind of pay a price for that. But frankly, it's not that much. I don't know how far. I think you may not even have been born yet when VHS recorders were out there. But if you wanted to buy a video recorder, thousands of dollars. If you wanted to buy the first CD player, thousands of dollars. On and on. If you want to buy the first of anything, it costs money. And so to get something under $1,000 that has, in my opinion, important features and gameplay that has never been done before, I think it's been a huge hurdle, and I just see it advancing more and more. But on that note, let's kind of talk a little geek now, and I'm going to show this. Actually, I'm going to go out to the desktop first. And why did I go ahead and think that this might be a good theme? Well, one of the things that it was curious to me, because of the other work I'm doing, is how quickly do these things update? One of the things that you may have been hearing if you've been following this kind of hardware is the IMU, which is the inertial measurement unit. All of our phones seem to have it, and obviously these headset. Well, this allows the computer to know the orientation of your head. When you rotate, your yaw, pitch. What's the last one? I can't think of it right now. But essentially, the three axes that we can move around, and they actually call it 9 degrees of freedom, which includes also a compass so that you'll know where your orientation or your bearing is. So all these things are thrown into what they call a fusion algorithm to give you proper information. But this only identifies the rotation of your head. It doesn't tell the system where you are in space. And both the Oculus Rift as well as the PlayStation, or not PlayStation, excuse me, even the PlayStation, we won't get into that this episode, but the HTC Vive have what they call positional tracking as well. And that lets the system know where you are in 3D space. But as you can see behind me, I've one of the places that normally has a lot of good stuff, if you wait it out, is Reddit. And I had been reading several articles about this process. How quickly does it update? Well, the IMUs built into your headsets are being sampled about 1,000 times per second. Well, that's more than adequate to provide the information that's needed in order to update the frames. In fact, using a technique, and I can't think of the term right now, Oculus came out with it first, it can use this information to kind of pre-render a scene. So this allows, as you move your head, the ability to actually to know in advance and then start planning that rendering of that frame before you get there, so that it helps in compensating for the motion issues that are plaguing, or not, I wouldn't say plaguing, I think they've been fairly much solved, but reducing the sickness that people have gotten, because frankly, we are very sensitive to motion, and some people more than others. And we expect when we move our eyes or move our head that the objects in front of us move accordingly. And when they don't, it severely affects us. So there are a lot of things that go into this. One is the 90 hertz refresh rate that you're probably familiar with. And if you did the math on it, it really takes a lot of effort to move something from your PC rendered at 90 frames per second. And especially at the resolution, which is 2160 by 1200. So you have that. You got to push a lot of stuff. Plus, you have to know exactly where you're at in orientation. Now, that doesn't explain 3D space. So, Chris, I'm assuming you've played around with your Oculus Rift over the weekend, yes?
Yeah, a little bit. I Saturday probably played on it for, I don't know, maybe a half hour or an hour. And I've been trying to spend a little time in it as much as possible. Yesterday, I got about 15 minutes or so, and I mostly am just exploring kind of like the variety of content. So one of the ones they had on there on the Oculus store, they have this newer one. It's called I'm gonna have to look it up. It's basically like it's called Within, and it's a bunch of different experiences. And one of the ones that I thought was phenomenal, it was pretty low res, but it was Saturday Night Live 40th anniversary, and you're sitting in the audience with like 100 celebrities, like A-list celebrities. You know, you've got Adam Sandler right next to you, and you've got Jack Nicholson, and you've got John Goodman, and all these guests, and Jerry Seinfeld is hosting Saturday Night Live. And even in the low res that it is, and like pretty, you know, it's not quite there as far as like the content delivery, the experience itself is amazing, because you're like, you feel like you're there with these people, and it's just really fun to actually participate like you're in the audience. And like I mean, it really does, it feels like you're in there with these people, and you can look around, you know, they're standing up at the audience, and normally the camera would be zooming to them, but you just turn your head and you look at them, and then you like look over and you can see audience members' reactions. It's totally a different way of delivering content, especially like a live comedy thing. And it, I mean, it really shows off the potential of these things
that you're talking about. You mentioned the word Within. I do know, and we didn't actually bring it up, and it's not one of our news items, but VRSE just received about $15 million in Fusion, and part of that was a name change. And I'm wondering, Within, is that their new name? I don't know. Maybe we can look it up a little bit later. But yes, that particular video you're talking about has been available both both in iOS and Android, and you could actually watch it in Google Cardboard. And I actually remember that one, and I thought the same thing, pretty cool. But keep in mind that this is a video, and it's only keeping track of the orientation of your head. For instance, if some of the games that you may have played, if you move your head forward in one of those videos, you don't really, it doesn't shift its position. But if you look at some of the video or the VR experiences, when you shift your head forward, you actually move forward. And if you remember when I had the DK2 when it first came out, I thought that was awesome because I played Half-Life that had been what do you want to call it, modified to allow you to play with the Oculus Rift. And I remember positioning my head, let me jump back to my screen, positioning my head around a corner to take out some of the guards, and realizing in the past I could never have done that. And so I was able to move my head around a corner and shoot and then duck back. So I never had to expose my body. And I felt like, wow, I had an unfair advantage finally, because I'm not really good at playing video games, but I thought that was pretty awesome. Well, getting back to the point, this is what they call positional tracking to allow you to move in space. And the Oculus, which you could cover at a different time, uses what they call the constellation system, where essentially you have one infrared camera that's positioned in front of you. That's that little tube that you have in front of you. And the headset itself actually has a series of infrared emitters, and they're spaced in a particular manner. And as you move your head, all that changes. So it's able to measure the geometric relationship between that. So if you move forward, obviously it's probably going to increase this pattern, because as you get closer, as you watch my hands, they get larger. So, and if you rotate, let's say my hand, you can tell that I've rotated it because my fingers have moved. So if you have positional emitters that you move around, you can determine where you're in space, either left, right, so forth. But if you tie that information to the IMU, which is being updated at 1,000, you don't need to update that information as often, because you're still rooted with your IMU in the headset, and then all this becomes adjunct information tied to it. Now, the light towers, if you remember, are room size. So let me jump right to, let's see where I put it. Let's go to the PDF of the actual HTC Vive and unsetting it. And it has an illustration, and I want to bring this up because I want to correct something that I had said the other day, because I was wrong. Yeah, here we go. All right, so notice where the light towers are at, or you have one in each corner, but notice they're in opposite corners. So you have one on one side. So notice the positioning. And I think, what do they say? It's 45 degrees from your monitor, you position one, and then immediately 180 degrees behind you is the other one. So as I mentioned before, not only do you have front visibility, but you also have rear visibility. So this gives you full coverage, so that, yes, you can look around, you can move back and forth, and it will be able to detect it. But what's really unique about this system versus what's done in the Oculus is that the actual receivers are in the headset itself. You remember I told you they had a whole bunch of detectors inside the headset. So these light towers are just basically, and I'll jump to it right now. Let's see where they are. This was a Gizmodo article last year. This is what it looks like inside. And I think this is the newer unit here, is you have basically two rotating drums that have an infrared beam. Do you see it there? It's running very slow. And it has these flashes, higher pulses that flash before, to kind of create a synchronized system. They're static. And then you have these beams that kind of rotate and paint the room. And what happens is that, if I remember correctly, what did they say? Every 1/60th of the second? If I remember, someone said it's like 8 millisecond rotation.
So there's mechanical parts in these.
Yes, there's two. But, there were mechanical parts in a lot of things. The laser disc player, the VHS. The important thing is that these things continuously rotate. It's not they're on and off. And your car is an item that has mechanical parts in it. So I'm not as concerned with that. Some people think, well, having a mechanical part, that's failure. Yeah, that's a possibility. But it's going to be very difficult to, what do you want to call it, make this into a solid state device, because it's very important. Because if you notice this beam rotating here, or this light, it's basically kind of like creating a scan or a beam path. And that's very important, because what it does is it sweeps at a precise period of time, both horizontally and vertically. Can you see that? And because it's doing this, the emitters inside this headset are detecting that. And they know exactly the time that passes, and because that flash identifies the start point. So it knows, okay, that means I'm going to get a sweep of the beam depending on my positioning. And then I can be able, using my IMU and what emitters detected, where I'm in physical space. Pretty neat, huh? So the cool thing is, this doesn't really need to be connected to anything. You can just plug these in, and because these patterns, because of the emission of light, can be detected, you'll always know where one unit light tower is and where the other light tower is. So let's see where I am. So I was looking, as I mentioned earlier, and I saw this one guy who goes by the name of Doc OK, and had written these long, lengthy explanations of the Oculus, and actually kind of refuted a few people. And I thought, well, this guy sounds pretty impressive. So I did a little more research, and I found that the guy's name was Oliver Kralos. Now, sadly, I was hoping to have him on the show today to explain this for himself, but he's going on vacation, which seemed like a smart idea. So maybe when he gets back, and when we return, we'll have him back on. But he also did a series of videos, and I'm going to go ahead and play this one. And it's 4 minutes. We won't go through the whole thing. Let's make sure that I've turned down the video or the audio. Can you hear that, Chris?
A little bit, faintly.
Okay, so let me turn it up a little bit. How about now?
Middle between my two base stations, which are approximately 4 meters apart.
Still pretty faint.
So it's around
How about
2.5 meters from the headset to each of the two base stations.
So
And here on
I'm
the
going to have
screen,
all the links there.
you
He's got his own
see,
channel, and he's got a
you
few
see
of
the
them. But
positional orientation
what he
of the
did is
headset
he put
indicated by these three axes,
the
which
headset
intersect in the
on a
middle. And
chair,
if I zoom in a bit more, you
and
can see
is
how it
showing
slightly
the, as you
jitters.
can see there, it seemed
And if I
quite
zoom
stable.
in
But now
quite a
he's
bit
zoomed
more,
in it, so
then
now you can
see,
actually see
in detail what it does. These
these
gray
small,
lines and
minute
white dots
changes
are a trace
of
of tracking
drift.
data.
Can you see that
Those
there?
are the last 2.5
So he
thousand
was in
measurements
real time
that get reported by the
capturing
tracking driver.
those points. And
The
normally,
driver
if you just
updates
put it on a
tracking
chair,
data
so it's
at
not really moving.
1006 hertz,
But
so
this
you know
is
where the
what's
signal comes from.
happening
So
internal.
that's what we're seeing
So
here
this
is
is
about
kind of
2.5
like
seconds
the
worth of tracking data.
dynamic error of
I
the
want
system
to
itself.
stop tracing that right now, and then measure the amount of noise that we have here.
So what he does
create a
is now
measurement
he's
tool
going to
and
capture
measure the distances. And then let's start by measuring
the
across
point.
from
So he's
here to
measuring
there, give or take, and
the
that gives us
distance.
a residual
So, and what does he
of
come up with?
0.34 millimeters,
Minus
which is
2.6
exceptionally small, I have to
millimeters
say.
or
And
something
then
like
the
that.
other
Well, that's,
direction gives us
point. We work with
0.32
millimeters all the time, but that's
millimeters,
still a very, very
also
small
very small.
amount
And
if
then
you're
the third
looking at it. I mean,
direction
so this is the
gives us
jitter that
about
you're seeing, that obviously
0.27
that
millimeters. So the tracking noise
because it's electronics and
is
you've
very
got those
small. And you
mechanical
notice that
components. Some people think it might be
device
temperature
drifts
issue.
just
I
a
don't
tiny
think
little
so. I
bit.
think
It
it's
used to be
mainly
here,
the
now it's over
mechanical.
here. But if you think
But
about
still,
that,
that's a
it's
very,
less than a
very
millimeter
fine,
as it is
small,
what it
minute
initially was. So in other
error.
words, the tracking is
But
pretty much drift-free
in a later
and has
video, and I don't know if you crossed that,
fairly
he actually
isotropic
moves it
residual noise
around.
of about 0.3
And I
millimeters.
think in this video, he
So what I
also
want to do
turns
now,
off one of the
is
light
I want
towers to show that
do
the
that
error rate
while
doesn't change too much in
one of
most of the
lighthouses
axes
is covered
except
up.
one, the
Do that
Z
right now.
axis,
I'm just gonna
because
put a piece of
the
paper
light towers
in
themselves
front
are
of the lighthouse,
positioned
and then you can see
180 degrees,
what the noise
45
looks like
degrees
in
off
response.
from your main point.
And the first thing that we
Because
notice
they're
is that the
180
noise
degrees one from the other, when you
didn't
turn
really
one
seem
off,
to change
you
all
don't
that
have
much.
both of them
Now
working
there's a
together,
little bit more jitter.
and you
So I'm going
even
to
though
collect a
the
little bit
X,
more
Y,
data,
or
let's stop tracing, and then we can measure it again.
doesn't have much
So now,
difference
if I
as
zoom a little
far
bit
as
more across
deviation
here,
as he's
there's an
showing
outlier
there.
there.
He's
Let's
going to
ignore
measure
that.
here in a
We have
moment.
approximately
When he turns it on its
0.37
axis, he
millimeters that way,
sees that the
approximately
error
0.21
shift is
millimeters
actually
that way. But what happens now
multiplied
is if
by
I turn this
2.
over,
See there?
you notice that now the noise in the third dimension,
and that's what
is
happens if you don't have
significantly
both
larger,
light towers. But even
than in the
so,
other
that's
two.
still
So it's
fairly
about this one
good.
Z
So
and
you
the other
don't
two X
necessarily
and
need
Y.
both.
And if we measure
Having
this,
both
we
and be
get
able to
a
position your
noise
head
of about 2.1
100,
millimeters.
360
So we have
is
suddenly
the
a highly
huge and cool feature
anisotropic
behind this. And the
noise
fact is these
distribution
don't
here.
need
The
to be
reason for
tied
that is
back
actually
into the
quite obvious.
system is very important.
When
Or
both
I'm sorry,
lighthouses are seen
I'll
in the
take
headset,
that
I'm
back.
going
They
to
do,
uncover
but
the
it's
second
done
lighthouse again.
differently.
Then
The problem is they
they
don't have
assist
to
each
be
other in tracking. But
all
if only one
combined
of them
within the
is running,
headset
then
itself.
it has to calculate the position of the
So
headset
again,
basically
the
via
important thing that
triangulation.
he
And
identifies
what
here, and
happens with
again, you can
triangulation
listen
is
to
that
this
the
for yourself
position
in
laterally to the
the
base
show notes,
station
is that
in X and Y
the
solution
IMU is still
is much,
extremely
much more
important
closely constrained
as the
than the
foundation,
position
and then this
in
is
the Z
adjunct
direction, which would be
information
towards
that's
or away
added
from the
to
base
it.
station. And that's
And
exactly what we are
in the
seeing
next
here.
video,
Laterally, you still
we
have
won't
about
show it,
0.3 millimeters,
he
but then away from
goes through and actually moves the unit around and then makes some measurement points. But one of the things that he shows is that because the actual lighthouse unit, or light towers, or however, actually rotate, those mechanical rotations, and I guess that's why they call them light towers, huh? I don't know. Oh, well. But as they rotate every 8 milliseconds, I think is what he said, there is a duration of time. And what it will do is it will compensate by using the IMUs. So every 8 milliseconds it updates, and it literally tries to figure the difference between one point in time and another. So if you're moving during that time frame, it interpolates, and he actually shows the shift in the change based upon the previous setting. And it's not a continuous, obviously, but it's not a discontinuous, meaning you have one point and then it immediately jumps to this new point. It tries to interpolate using the IMU. So it's a more linear or smooth pattern. Does that make sense?
Interesting stuff,
Yeah.
Mike.
Yeah.
I don't know how you understand all this and how you came up with all this.
Well,
and how this guy, Oliver Kralos, how does he even figure any of this stuff out?
Well, as you could see there, and one of the reasons I showed the video is that he basically either wrote a routine or there was a routine available that takes the information out of the lighthouses and the IMU, and then he essentially plots it. And he plots it in real time, and then he records these events so he can then measure. And that's what he was doing there. So he was literally looking at the spatial distance of the samples. And he knows how often they sample, because a lot of this is identified in the specification papers. And one key point is that, and I haven't found it yet, supposedly HTC Vive has made this open source. So if you wanted to build your own light towers, you could, and you could build your own algorithms based upon that for your own system, or create an adjunct. And the reason they did this is so that you could build your own hand controllers. So maybe a gun, so instead of just those. So you could use this for other things. You could use it for other type of positional tracking. So I think that's pretty cool on HTC Vive that they created this very unique and in my opinion, a very elegant and low-cost solution, and then made it available for other people. And, not take anything from Oculus. Oculus did the same thing with their DK and TK2. You pretty much knew exactly what's going on there. Their algorithms as well as their SDK was free, still is. However, people are concerned that Oculus is becoming more of a closed environment, and we'll talk about that later. And not only in the games that they're offering, but actually the SDK. And if you go back to the HTC Vive, they're using something called OpenVR, and all of it is available, where in the Oculus world, yes, you can develop for it, but it only works with the Oculus. And some people think that wasn't the direction that
one thing I've noticed is that some stuff is available in both Steam VR and the Oculus Store. I don't know how closed they can really make it at this point. I mean, it essentially, I mean, there's already a ton of content on the Steam VR store for it. So, I mean, if you can develop for Steam and make it Oculus ready, then I don't really know how closed they're really going to make it.
Well, I'll explain that in a moment. So that pretty much, let me summarize and then we'll get back to it. So the whole point that's cool is go back, he's got 2 or 3 videos, is by sweeping both horizontally and vertically with these rotating drums, you know exactly when it will sweep because you get a bright pulse to begin with. So then all you have to do is count or time. And then you know both the horizontal and vertical rotations and what actual elements are being swept on the headset. Now, keep in mind the handsets also do this, and he talks about in length measuring that. And he found that the sampling rate is half that of what's being done with the headset. And he said the reason for that is because the handsets more likely are Bluetooth, so you have the latency issue there. So they just, I think, have the sampling rate with that. But they said it's still very accurate and works very well. So that's one of the reasons why you have the responsiveness. And like I said, my reason for looking into this is, do we need to match the IMU to the positional sampler? And the answer is obviously no. In fact, it's about either between half, not even that, 1/10 to maybe 1/5 the rate of the IMU that's being tracked. And the reason for that, again, is because it's adjunct information. The IMU in the headset is your main unit, and then the adjunct information to determine positional is added to that. And that doesn't have to be sampled as often. So just kind of keep that in mind, which keeps the cost down. So those people still complaining about the high cost, well, these things could have been a lot more expensive if you use like laser tracking, like the Air Force and the military use, where you've got these $10,000+ systems, and that's probably the low end. What we have in front of us is like our smartphones. You know, people complain about spending $500 for a smartphone. Just 10 years ago, that was almost a fantasy. Having something that could fit in your pocket with that processor. Oh, well, let's kind of move on to our first news item. Chris, what do you got?
Well, Mike, Ollie, we got to check this out. This popped up. This is actually front page today. Ollie, a 3D printed self-driving minibus to hit the road in U.S. So one of our favorite people we've been following for some time is Local Motors, which I don't know if you remember. They had that 3D printed car that was like, they were driving around, I think like L.A. or New York. They have partnered with IBM to make this minibus. And they claim they can print this bus in 10 hours and then assemble it in 1 hour. So they're claiming in 11 hours they can have this thing ready to go. And it's a fully autonomous bus that can carry 12 people. And it's powered by IBM's Watson computer. And they want to have this thing milling around town.
Did you say it's an autonomous vehicle?
It's an autonomous bus. So look, there's no driver. I don't know if you could see this image. Let me blow it up a little bit.
Yes.
There's no driver. It's just a little minibus that can hold 12 people. And they're going to start rolling this out in some different cities. So Las Vegas has purchased 2 of the vehicles, and Miami-Dade County is exploring a pilot program. I don't know. They're already trying to sell these things. So autonomous vehicles are like here. So it's going to be demoed in National Harbor, Maryland over the next few months with additional trials expected in Las Vegas and Miami. Local Motors is also in talks to test the vehicles in dozens of cities around the world, including Berlin, Copenhagen, and Canberra. Yeah. Ollie.
Pretty interesting.
I know. I kind of want to go take a ride. You know, I've yet to go on a fully autonomous car or vehicle. And I kind of want to try it out just because, you know.
I can imagine something like this being at Disney World, but I don't think
totally
we would like it. Well, you know that Uber has been really pushing for autonomous vehicles too, which I don't know if the Uber drivers would like that, but well, that looks pretty cool. Do you know what the speed is on it?
It didn't say anything about that. At least I don't think it did. I read, yeah. No, they're just, as far as speed, the only speed they talk about is assembly. But they do say it has 30 sensors and it streams data from IBM's cloud. So I mean, it's got to have a connection, obviously, right? It's got to have some sort of wireless umbilical cord to the cloud to know. So hopefully, it's got to have redundancy. You would think. It seems like I think I'm going to let other people ride on it first and test it out. Let them work out the bugs before I get on one. But I'm sure already I think what Tesla has done, and what they've, kind of it has to be just an order of magnitude better than a human driver. And, human drivers are not perfect, obviously. Driving in California, we know that. So I think it just needs to be, I think really what these autonomous vehicles need to be is just, as long as they're twice as safe as a human, then they pass.
Yeah. Well, actually, there's been some interesting articles on that. And yes, it does appear that we want our remote items to be much more accurate. And one of the reasons this becomes an issue is what happens when something does go wrong. It will be amplified many times more because we obviously hold ourselves in high esteem, meaning the human race. But it's a very good point. In Google has accumulated, I don't remember, millions of hours now, if I remember correctly. And they had an accident some time ago, and it actually wasn't their fault, but the fact is that it was an autonomous vehicle magnified the accident. I think it was just a bumper. Nobody was hurt, if I remember correctly. But, I mean, these are some very striking points. And one of the reasons that, if I remember correctly, who did you just mention? I don't know why you don't stick in my head. The electric car.
Oh, Tesla.
Thanks, Tesla. Geez, it should be synonymous. But they were promoting it, and then there was some backlash. I guess one guy, I guess it has an auto park feature, an auto retrieve feature, and he set it off, and it ran into a tree or something. I can't remember, but they were able to, because you're always on and they record pretty much what you're doing. They realized, no, I think this was your fault. But and that obviously concerns some people, that Tesla knows exactly where your vehicle's at all times. That could be interesting in the future for people. So I don't know. I don't have one. Can't afford one, and probably will be another 10 years before I actually step foot on one. But who knows? Maybe sooner. So I'm going to jump into something more real, something that you and I could go out and buy today. I don't know. Do you ever buy anything from MonoPrice?
You know what? I don't. I have not. I've heard their filament is great, and it's a good source for filament. But I kind of stick with the tried and true. For my filament lately, filaments of choice have been either the nylons or the Ninja Flex or the ColorFab engine. That ColorFab engine material is just so sweet it just prints so nicely and no warping. So I'm leaving ABS behind for.
Well, the reason I brought up MonoPrice wasn't the fact that they sell filament, which they do. MonoPrice has been around because they sell cables and a lot of electrical connectors, and they've kind of made a name for themselves for the low cost, but for the most part, well-made products in that area. And then they've gotten into larger items, like I think I have a MonoPrice little 4-channel or 6-channel audio preamp to USB that was very low cost and had some good reviews. So they've kind of taken it upon themselves to offer things. And as you mentioned, they have sold filament, but they really haven't carried a 3D printer. And there was thoughts of creating or carrying a SLA printer. And I think that's been abandoned. So they've gone with something like this. But the cool thing about this is that you can get this MP Select Mini 3D printer for $200. So as you know, we've looked at 200 or low-cost printers in the past, and they've really been garbage. But this particular one stood out for me, at least, because it's actually fairly reasonable. And so they kind of go through it. If you notice, when we looked at the picture there, it's not something really elegant, doesn't have a nice plastic housing. It's pretty just kind of a raw thing. But to me, for schools or something like this is probably a great hands-on little product. And the guy thinks, yeah, it's got boring specs, it's nothing really precise, but it does have a decent print. Here's our little benchy. We've talked about this, and it's actually good. Some overhang in here, but for the most part, it looks like a fairly good model. And some of the others, looks like there's a little more stranding that I'd like in this. But the guy tears it down, and it's like a lot of items out there, basically a board. But what he thinks is the primary reason to go for something this is that it uses a little 32-bit ARM Cortex with a nice little color LCD screen, so that you could obviously run this independently. You don't have to have a computer, but it gives you a nice clean panel of what your machine is doing, and then able to actually run your prints directly on it. So thought that was kind of cool. So here's the little board, but it's kind of funny. I mean, essentially the connectors themselves take up most of the board, but you probably have pulled apart a 3D printer or have actually had a board, and in the past you'd had these huge heat sinks, and then the processors, they took a lot of space. And it's funny, even in the 3D market, your electronics have been reduced even more.
Oh yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, it doesn't take much, I don't think, anymore to go from, typical through-hole solder connections once you've had a board and you've tested it thoroughly in the field to go to SMB. Like this is all just surface mounted, because I mean the cost savings on these now to have the pick and place put it together rather than hand soldering everything, and all the advantages of SMB. Not only that, you get the smaller components, they're cheaper, they're more robust.
Well, the other thing too, and maybe if you remember the Cost So Clear, the power components, as you see here, they're SMD. Those were soldered through. But I think this is kind of neat. There's obviously, 3 of them under 4? They use one bridge heatsink there. I would be a little concerned about that. I don't know if that would be enough, but who knows? It might be. Other than that, it looks fairly clean, very small board. Can control that little color LCD panel and provide independent printing, which is always a good thing. I made sure that all my printers had that feature. Other than that, it shows an innovative but low-cost hot end. I don't know how innovative it is. It looks really straightforward to me, except small. But the cool thing is it's $200. And I know that there have been a number of low-cost printers out there. XYZ has one, but I haven't seen one this low cost. And normally things that have been this low cost either have failed, like Kickstarters, or are really a piece of you-know-what. And that doesn't seem to be the case here. The guy seems to like it, and we've actually talked about the same guy who did this review several times before, Brian, who's done a few Hackaday type printer reviews. So don't know, if you need a low cost $200 and want to get into it and experiment. I remember back just 3 years ago that experimenting would be thousands of dollars. To get something similar to that for $200, I think is amazing. All right, well, that's the MonoPrice NP. So who knows, maybe I'll get one myself. Maybe buy one for a local library or something. I don't know. All right, anything else, Chris? What's the next item?
Well, this one was sent to me by you, and it's called Lix. And it's lixpen.com, and it's the smallest circular 3D printing pen in the world. And it was a Kickstarter, apparently, and
And I'll tell you what, you can go ahead and keep talking, and I'll just play this little video while you're talking.
Maybe I'll scroll to your... So it's a little bit sleeker design than some of the other 3D printing pens I've seen. And I actually haven't had much hands-on. I know I've seen these things. They're selling them like at Staples now. And this is actually, they're making some cool stuff. I have not really had much need for anything like this. But this one actually looks like it does a pretty decent job. It can print into air and space. Wow, and they have some pretty cool art that they're showing off. So it's a circular pen versus being kind of like the...
Well, one of the things that struck me right away is it looks like a well-crafted aluminum grade shaft with a knurled grip. That reminds me of the, I don't know, I used to get a bunch of mechanical pencils, and I used to spend a little bit of money on them, and I just liked the way that they felt. And this kind of reminded me of that, and that's why I kind of added it in there. I thought, well, that's kind of cool. Now, if you notice, the price is $139 if you look down at the bottom there, which is a little steep. And as you said, there are other solutions, but they're like, I don't know, like jumbo crayons compared to this thing. And I do have one, but you know, you got to have like some artistic talent to do this stuff too. I mean, it's not something that, unlike a 3D printer, where you can craft something on your computer and then send it. This, you have to have mechanical skill, and you have to have dexterity in order to produce something. And you know, sadly, I haven't worked with it enough, but I have found they're kind of cool for inserting plastic or binding two items together. So I have used it for that. That kind of works well, or remodeling a particular area that may have cracked or changed. So I have used it for that, and then I just sand it down. But something like this just seemed like a nice, cool crafted unit. But for $139.95, I probably will pass on it. I just thought it was kind of neat.
Yeah, pretty cool. And they're available for pre-order. Apparently they're planning on shipping at the end of July, so sometime at the end of next month.
All right, so let's see what I've got going on. Let's see, did I put that one out? Oh, I thought this is kind of new under our 3D and design. So let's see where we got that. 3D design and architecture. Da-da-da. So I thought this was kind of neat. One, because it's a student who created a design tool to be used up on the space station. So as you know, they have a 3D printer up there. And so they sent this up there, and this high school senior won a Futures Engineering's first ever challenge. And I guess this is him here. He was... Where's this at? Does it identify? So you do know Huntsville, Alabama has a large space center, right? Did you know that? Yeah. So some people think the South doesn't have anything, but I don't know if that's where this guy is, but here's a little NASA space station video. So I think that's kind of cool, and I think it's extremely important that we continue to keep our young minds involved in space. And NASA's, in my opinion, always done a good job of making knowledge and information available. So if this is something that you've wanted to pursue, I like the fact that it's available. Of course, you know, since it's government sponsored, I think that's really the only thing that could be done.
How many monitors do these guys have? I mean, like, look at how many monitors that one guy has on his desk. Oh my God. These guys need VR. They'd save a fortune.
Like, do you remember watching the Matrix series, especially, what was it, the third movie? And they had some guys in like a control room, and it was like white, and they were in there, and they were opening up the bank doors to whatever it was, Xanadu. I don't remember the location, but remember, did you watch the whole series, Chris?
Of which series?
The Matrix.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Did you watch all three movies?
Yes.
Okay. So they had this room. It was a control room. And then later on, you find out they're just jacked into their own little mini world acting as a control room. So I thought that was kind of amusing. But yes, I could see them using VR. But personally, I don't think VR has the resolution yet to provide all the information accurately. Plus, I don't know how long they could use it. Have you ever looked at the SpaceX control room? It's kind of a similar setting. So let me jump.
Yeah, but this is like everybody, each desk has like, I mean, there was a chick, she had like 2 rows.
Here,
Look at it.
like this.
Look at this. I mean, each person has like, I mean, this one lady in the front, she's got like what? She's got like 8 monitors on her desk.
Well, you know, if these are like Acer or Asus monitors for $200 to $300 in the past, just a large graphics monitor would have been $1,000, $1,500, even more. You could like get a whole bunch of panels for the same cost. You don't watch Silicon Valley, right? Yes, no?
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't spoil anything for anyone out there that's listening, Mike.
I'm not spying, but there's a scene in this season when they first made some money, and they got a different CEO. Oh, I guess I did spoil it for somebody, but one of the, actually 2 of them had like a bank of monitors. It's like, and they were
they're like, we can get whatever we want.
Yeah. Well, it was just amusing, and then later on they found out how much they cost and sold them. But that's another story. Oh, I'm sorry. I hope I didn't ruin it for anybody. Oh well, but I'm not surprised. But if you've seen one of my rooms, I have one kind of similar to that. I have 3 monitors and I have 3 series like that. So I'm not too surprised with that. But again, mainly it's because they're not that expensive anymore. So anybody pretty much can spend $2,000 and not even that, and come up with 3 or 4 monitors, considering you can buy them for $200 to $300 a piece now. But I thought that's cool. And then obviously this is the item that was printed, and it looks like a calibration type tool. Oh, actually, like an all-in-one tool, huh? It's like got a grip here, has a few hexagon nuts so that you could use it as a wrench.
Oh, that must be so frustrating on the space station, because the one thing is that you never have enough of is tools. So like they must absolutely love this 3D printer, because now they can actually make tools, and it's like,
well,
going
not
to the
only
hardware
that,
store.
a lot of the tools have to be specialized, and in this guy, I guess that's the same video, but in this case, this is like an all-in-one. And if you've had a Gerber tool or something like that, having a bunch of tools in a very compact space to me has always been very cool. From an engineering perspective, I always, and you may have seen or may not have, I always have something that has a pair of pliers, but it all fits in like a little tiny space, and it's always on my keychain. So I've always got a tool set with me. And so when I see these kind of things, and the fact is they could 3D fabricate this and make a few of these, put it in their shirt pocket, and always have something there to like unbolt something, I think is kind of neat. So hats off to that guy. There he is there. Big thumbs up for creating a little unique tool and it being 3D printed in space. All right, Chris, next item.
Well, should we go on to 3D Scanner Darkly?
Wait, let's get the Scanner Darkly up. There we go. Da-da-da.
So this is from redwooddata.org, redwood-data.org. They have released a large data set of 3D object scans. They created a data set of more than 10,000 3D scans of real objects, and they recruited 70 operators, equipped them with consumer-grade mobile 3D scanning setups, and paid them to scan objects in their environments. The operators scanned objects of their choosing outside the laboratory and without direct supervision by computer vision professionals. The result is a large, diverse collection of object scans, from shoes, mugs, and toys to grand pianos, construction vehicles, and large outdoor sculptures. They worked with an attorney to ensure that the data acquisition did not violate privacy constraints. The acquired data was irrevocably placed in public domain and available freely. check it out. It's got a nice big public domain license. They were acquired using PrimeSense Carmine cameras, and the acquisition data was acquired using 640 by 480 at a frame rate of 30 hertz.
So if I can interrupt you for a moment, the
Yeah.
PrimeSense Carmine is a derivative. So if you're familiar with the Kinect, the PrimeSense 10 or the Kinect 1, this is the same technology. This was a version created, but also keep in mind the PrimeSense was bought out by Apple. So they must have still had quite a few of these available using the OpenNI, open source scanning, or maybe even the new version. The other thing I want to point out is that the ocular or the occipital structure sensor is based on this as well. So it's not the best scanner. So I'm looking at these and saying, wow, those are actually pretty good. So cool.
more than 10,000 models
And
acquired.
these are all downloadable or?
Downloadable, freely available in the public domain. You can go check them out. You can actually search. They even have them cataloged. Ooh, there's some motorcycle ones. And let's check this guy out. They even have the video of the walk around with the sequences themselves. So you can actually download the whole data set that they used for and then you can also download the PLY files here, and they are hosted at stanford.edu. So I think there's actually 3dscan.stanford.edu. Let's see where that goes. It goes right to Redwood Data.
Cool. So make sure that you make sure that's in the show note. I'm pretty impressed. As you know, I've been working with a derivative of this PrimeSense technology, and some of these actually pretty good, or at least from this position, looks pretty good. Did they identify the software they used with the PrimeSense Carmine?
That part I haven't. I don't know. It just says that they consecutive. No, it doesn't.
Well, if you're interested, you can still get the I think on eBay, the Asus Action basically is a PrimeSense Carmine, which is or the newer version, or a Kinect. You can probably get one of those fairly cheap on eBay. But the Occipital makes a software package called Skinect. There's another software package out of Germany, and I can't remember the name of it right now. We've covered in the past that can be used. They've really, some of the algorithms that they now use are really, really good. And they can provide in real time, like this guy's showing here, the ability to stitch and accumulate objects. Now, of course, what do you want to call it? The mesh detail may not be as good as an Artect or a few other things, but they don't have the price. And obviously, 10,000 models, a lot of them look as good as this. Sometimes you may not need it, so kind of neat. So the large 10,000 items, huh? Well, that car was pretty impressive. That sports car, that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, and what's cool is they have the video showing the data that they actually used. So they actually include this zip file that has the RGB-D sequence. So if you have software that can actually make a texture map as well, a UV texture map, for full color, you can download the RGB-D sequence and you can reconstruct it yourself. But then they also include a PLY that has the reconstruction of it in 3D.
Actually, the term RGB-D, the RGB is the red, green, and blue component. The D is the depth information. So with like the Skinect software and others, you're literally recording, as you see there, all that information. And then if you have a device that's able to play back that and then recreate, you can actually take that raw data and use your own algorithms for it. So that's actually the RGB color as well as the depth information.
pretty amazing. So you can actually download this and reconstruct it yourself if you have other software that you would rather. And so you have access to the data. So here it's showing the video too of the walk around. So you have the video and you can see exactly what they did to acquire the 3D scan. So pretty cool stuff. Redwooddata.org will include the link in the show notes.
Great. Well, thanks on that. Well, moving on to something else that we have covered at length is Itsy's 3D. If you remember, we scanned you. I've scanned quite a few people, and their claim to fame is that they used the structure sensor and then moved on to the R200 Intel RealSense 200 scan unit to create the ability to create not only a mesh, but a great detailed RGB, especially with the iOS cameras. I just learned today, I just got an email because I signed up for their services. Anybody who has iOS software probably got this, but essentially they're shutting down their cloud. Now, if you remember, when we first talked about Itsy's 3D, the company is out of Russia. I don't know if you remember that. But we also identified last week that part of Itsy's was purchased by Intel. So I'm wondering if there is a correlation between the shutdown and the fact is the main company, Itsy's, is now owned by Intel. Now, Itsy's 3D supposedly have gone on to become their own independent company, and they may have moved to San Francisco. So I've always wondered where all my scan data was going because it is processed in the cloud. Is it like in some Russian KGB server somewhere and being constantly analyzed? So, Chris, you probably had this profile set up on some Russian server, so you might be a target one day. I'm just kidding. I don't think that's the case. But it is something to be, I would say be concerned with, but be aware of that if you're working with design tools, it's like a Fusion 360. What Onshape is another product that is basically cloud-based, and cloud's becoming more and more prominent. As you know, Google uses cloud, Amazon uses cloud. Basically, a lot of stuff being held in servers outside of your control, and they're being hacked. So I just thought this was something that we should probably keep in the back of our mind as we become more and more used to, or maybe even controlled by, our tools that we don't have access or control over the data that's being placed there. So just thought that was interesting, and it kind of provoked, seeing this email kind of provoked that thought process that maybe this was an issue or could be an issue. Any thoughts on that, Chris?
No, I kind of want to know, I kind of want to see what the app's capable of now.
Oh, well, you'll have to get a better iOS device. Well, one thing is, and I don't think it still does phone capability. It's one of the things that I've asked them to do is, when will you support phones? They told me because the user interface has to change, and because I create my own 3D scanning app, yes, it does, but it's not insurmountable. But currently it's only for tablets. And so you'd have to, you have an iPad though, right?
Yeah, an older one.
Yeah. So, and I found that newer ones actually process better. So you would have to get a newer unit, plus you need a structure sensor. I don't know. Do you know anybody who has one of those? I don't know.
I know this guy, Mike.
Okay. Oh, well. So yeah, it's a cool piece of software. Does a pretty good job. But again, keep in mind that it's using a structure sensor type sensor or the RealSense 200, and they aren't the best sensors. So on that note, I think we can move on to your next item, Chris, since my camera
VR. Corner in a round room.
Okay, here we go. Dun, 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 corner.
Okay, E3 this week. Obviously, we had E3. Big announcements from Nintendo, Sony, bunch of game studios unveiled some great footage. There was, I think, probably one of the better ones besides the Zelda game was the. There was a from the producer of Metal Gear. He has a new game franchise he's working on that looks pretty mind-bending. But this is more pertains to our audience, is the $399 PlayStation VR is launching on October 13th. So big news. We knew it was in the pipeline. We've talked about it, but they also announced a gun for first-person shooters that they are claiming has 1-to-1 accuracy. So if you move the gun in real life, it moves it in the game at a 1-to-1 ratio. But then they also announced all kinds of games: Star Wars Battlefront, which will get PSVR content in the X-Wing VR mission, Batman Arkham VR, Final Fantasy 15, which will have a PSVR mode in the PlayStation VR experience. Quantum Dream has a new game called Detroit Become Human.
Yeah, that's a pretty. I was debating if I was going to show that. I didn't realize that it was VR. That's kind of a neat little trailer. Essentially, you play an android, and your job is to stop people committing suicides, or in this, the opening scene. So if you haven't seen, I think it'd be cool to go ahead and watch it.
And Resident Evil, Capcom's franchise, crazy horror games. I don't know if you played Resident VR or Resident Evil games, but or seen the movies. But yeah, the games. The last few games that I played that were the Resident Evil games left a little bit. Their interface is a little clunky, and that's what I find is weird about some of these games that like. They have like a clunky game interface, and it just doesn't make any sense. It's like so easy to not do that anymore, and kind of learn from some of the games that have a better interface. And hopefully the VR kind of changes that up. I don't know really why they are making a mention here of God of War again, because God of War obviously they announced a new PS4 title, but I don't think it really has anything to do with VR, because I don't think they're going to have VR for that, but maybe they are. So it's mentioned in this article. This came to us via PCMag.com. Oh, and here's the Death Stranding reveal. This is Kojima Productions.
So I don't know if you're a fan of The Walking Dead, but I can't even remember his name in there. But if you are, that face should look familiar to you. Supposedly they were going to make a movie together that didn't pan out, but it looks like he's the lead character in this upcoming very weird trailer. So if you're into weird stuff, this might be a very weird and interesting title.
Yeah, and Farpoint, another game. So it looks like upon launch, October 13th is the date that Sony set for PlayStation VR. It looks like they're going to have quite a bit of content available right away. So upon launch. So yeah, we're looking out. I'll be looking out for that. And I don't have a PS4, but they're supposed to maybe have a new PS4 at some point.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is some people have claimed that the reason they're putting out a new PlayStation 4 is that the old one really would not be able to support VR. That seems to be dispelled because a lot of these games were running on a standard PS4. They've done some things that some people feel kind of taken the cheap road. To say, I don't know, words aren't flowing very well today, but essentially, as we talked about before, the PlayStation VR runs at a refresh frame of 120 frames per second. However, the content, one of its modes, is 60 frames per second. So keep in mind, even though you can refresh your screen fast, getting pixels there at, let's say on the case of the Oculus, 90 frames or 60 frames or even 120 frames is a lot of pixels to be pushed. And it's not just transferring them from your computer to the device, which requires a lot of bandwidth, but manipulating pictures, not only in space, in orientation, but you have to create one for each eye. So if you keep this in mind, and another thing that needed to be pointed out is normally the frame, even though you may have a physical frame, let's say on the Oculus of 2160 by 1200, the frame that it's being, that physical frame is being derived from is like 3000, I can't remember, by 1600. So it's a much larger frame, and they use that in order to apply the distortion factors to compensate for the lens artifacts. And so it's a larger frame, logical frame. And you multiply that by 2, no, I'm sorry, not 2, so it's 2160. Actually, it's 1080 by 1200 per eye. And then obviously that's 15 by 1600 per eye. And that have to be rendered. And this has to be rendered 90 times a second. So this is why you have the bottleneck. That's why you need the fast cards, because it's not just pushing it like a DVD player. You're having to have to actually manipulate based upon your orientation, the scene in front of you. So it requires a lot of computational. And some people just frankly didn't think these PlayStation would do that. I personally feel they probably are taking some shortcuts, and it'll probably be apparent when we get some more intimate reviews. But, you know, you got to start somewhere, and you got to get it in everybody's homes before people are willing to spend even more money on it, or waiting for the curve for the prices to come down as we become more experienced in developing lower cost products. You know, it's like the DVD player, which you can buy for like $30. Used to be $1,000. Just something. No. All right, so I'm going to move on to another low cost product, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about my debacle. So this is OSVR's HDK2. The previous version was the HDK 1.4, and I did either receive an email or saw this on the web. They were talking about a brand new 2, and I kind of recognized by the way that they were marketing this that the reason they're called the HDK2, one, because it's now 2.0, but the fact is they use dual screens like another product, like one that Chris has probably very nearby. Uses dual screens, 21 by 60, 1200. You know, I just talked about that. 1080 by 1200 per each eye. And literally, it is physically 2 screens in the eyes. The other thing they talk about, I don't know if they mentioned it here, is it has like a 440 ppd. And let's see if we got that figure here. Yeah, 441. So I figured out the size of it. It's about 3.6. If they go with the same manufacturer as their previous panel, more than likely it's AUO. I have found out through my own research that AUO actually has developed panels for a lot of companies. Right now, the only companies that I know of that are developing panels is in this size are EDO, AUO, Samsung, and maybe even Sharp. And the 2 others, EDO is a Chinese company and AUO is a Taiwanese company. And currently, if you wanted to buy this kind of panel, they are available on Alibaba and a few other places and through the manufacturer. As I mentioned in the other show, these panels aren't cheap. You can probably buy them in volume for 2 panels, about $150 to $200. So it's remarkable. Let's go to the buy now. It's remarkable that they'll be able to sell this thing for $399 because a lot of the costs will be in those panels. They're going to have to create a new driver board in order to support these. The FPGA that's used previously only drove it at 1080p, 60 hertz refresh, even though they claimed a higher refresh. The actual panel was being driven at 60. They used some tricks. And if you notice, if you go back to some of the marketing stuff, they've kind of done away with that. Their previous was $299, so it's only a $100 difference. And I don't see that being an issue because it's about a $100 difference in the cost of the panels. They will have an upgrade price. Do they or do they not? So here we go. They have it grade $249. So if you have the previous version. Now, what I find interesting is that they have these prices here, but they don't really have a way to click on them. And that brings me to kind of a complaint that I have about OSVR. If you remember last week, our main theme title is you get what you pay for. So as I found out the hard way, I had cracked my screen because I tried to clean it, and I found out that these things are extremely fragile. So if you find yourself cleaning your screen, please be gentle. Unlike your cell phone or your smartphone, which uses Gorilla Glass, or something similar, that is not the case with these. It's a very thin piece of glass. And sadly, I didn't feel that the panel was supported well enough after taking it apart. It's kind of like a plastic, it's not even solid, that supports it. So I must have pushed it too hard, or maybe not too hard, maybe just at the wrong point, and it cracked. And so I called them or emailed them and said, hey, send me one of these. Here's my FedEx number, try and get it overnight. It's been a week later and no response for 3 or 4 days. Finally found out that, sorry, they couldn't do that. And I would have to pay $150. Actually, it's close to $175 to ship it there and back, because I have to ship them the whole headset for them to, as they call it, professionally replace it. Yet, as you can see here on the screen, they list out all the prices of all these kits, and they show, like here, that there was a Leap Motion bundle, which you get for $349. They were going to create a screen replacement for the 1.3 to 1.4 that you could buy separately. And I don't know if you can still do that, but they show this as a product for the experimenter or the what do you want to call it, the enthusiast who wants to get into VR and experiment with it. And literally you have to. Setting up the software isn't that easy. Tested did a review of this the Hacker Development Kit number 2 at the E3. And one of the things that was identified is that they're going to push really hard to make it more consumer friendly, because they want to make this a consumer product. So maybe the company behind this, which is Razer, where you actually buy this from, has gotten away from being more of an enthusiast, hobbyist, and more into a consumer, which is probably why I can't buy the parts. I think it's misleading because they want to claim that they're an open source product, that all the parts are available, at least identified. That was not the case with the panel itself on the 1.3, which is the same one using the 1.4. So I have had to go inside and write down the model number, which, as I mentioned already, is an AUO panel, and see if I can find it elsewhere, either through AUO themselves or I don't know. But I sure the hell am not going to pay $175 to get something replaced that I could easily repair myself. I think that's just wrong. And the fact is that if I would have spent, how much is it, $5.99 for an Oculus Rift? Not only would I have had, in my opinion, a better lightweight product with a more advanced system, I pretty much, with my only paying $299 plus $175, came very close to buying one. And I would have gotten a 1-year warranty versus a 90-day warranty, which is another thing to keep in mind. You create an experimenter unit that doesn't have much of a warranty, you're kind of on your own. And the sad thing is that since they don't provide parts for it, unless you send it in for service, to me, left a bad taste in my mouth. So I probably won't buy another OSVR. I may look at seeing if they have a kit to replace it, but it may not look like they're going to be doing that. So this claim of identifying individual components, I think, is a misnomer, and I'm calling them on it. So I will send them another email. Why do you list all these component prices if they mean nothing? I can't actually buy these components. And we'll see what comes back next week. Chris, you got any words on that? You going to go out and buy an OSVR now? Oh, wait, you have it.
Nope. I have one VR unit so far, and I think one's enough for me. I think they've got a little ways to go still. Yeah, I mean, if you spend more than a half hour on the unit and you're doing something motion, you'll get. I've noticed it has not escaped full motion sickness yet. So some of the titles definitely definitely cause a little motion sickness. And I'm not one to be prone to motion sickness normally. So like I don't normally get sick on boats or planes or even in cars, but the VR is a little disoriented, or you're a little disoriented when you're in there, and it can cause some motion sickness for sure.
Well, as mentioned, the OSVR, if you don't have a lot of money or you're an experimenter or developer and like its openness, great, but keep in mind that they've kind of backed away on the 1.3 thereafter, providing all that information. So they're trying, I don't know if they're trying to isolate it. I do know that it was much more difficult to accumulate all the 1.3 schematics and so forth. And the 1.4 was basically just a screen diffusion film. And who knows what they'll do with the 2. But so far, I've been not very happy. And as you know, I also know the CEO. And okay, so we got to keep moving on. So I got a few more items. We've been speaking about the Oculus. So on that note, Tweaktown had written something earlier that a company, Crow Team, remember them? We had them on our show. They do a couple of games. One that they're known for is Serious Sam, so they've created a VR version of that. But it appears that Oculus approached them to create an exclusive title. And this guy here wrote that, how did he put it? Shitting of money was... So they pretty much said, no, we're not going to take your shitting of money because we want to...
a shit ton.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A shit ton of money.
Okay, shit ton of money.
That's a
I'm adding
briefcase
a
of money.
Croatian accent to that. But obviously, yeah. So they decided they weren't going to do that. This one guy leaked out in a tweet about it, and that created a huge debacle because some of the people who own HTC Vives figured a way around it so they could buy their stuff on the Oculus and then play it on their HTC, and then they closed that hole. So a lot of people have been very angry because the Oculus was supposed to be more open. Hey, and my attitude is if you buy the game, it doesn't matter what your hardware is, but obviously Oculus has not thought that way. Crow Team felt that that's not the direction they wanted to go. And then the CEO of Crow Team came out and said, no, that really wasn't it. And then Upload wrote this, that no, Oculus pretty much said we were going to have just a limited time exclusivity. And but then makes me wonder, what was that period of exclusivity? And that Crow Team decided they weren't going to take that shit ton of money. And so that leaves me a little bit in question. And then Gabe Newell, what happened to my Gabe Newell? Oh, well. Gabe Newell. Oh, well. Gabe Newell, and I'm actually looking at you. Gabe Newell wrote something saying that there have been other companies that have been approached, and he's not happy with it, but he thinks it will all iron out at the end. Obviously, that has not been their direction. But then if you remember, a lot of people complained about Steam OS being the only place to be able to buy games at one time. That kind of leveled out, and that's a place that people go, at least if you've got a PC. And but then if you own a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One, you've kind of been locked in as well to exclusivity. So I'm on the fence on this. You know, the point is these products do need to make money, and if they have been selling them for little over, they're not making a lot of profit on the hardware, where do you make it up? And that's always the big question. But if you came across as being more of an open source or equal play type system in the beginning, and now you've kind of closed down, obviously that can upset some people's too. So I'm on the fence on all that. And since I'm just happy my DK2 still works. I'll be unhappy when my DK2 stops working and I won't be able to play the stuff that I may have purchased or already accumulated. I also don't like the way that Oculus kind of, at least maybe that's changed in the latest build, but if you noticed, all of your content is on your main drive. Did you know that? And since most of these games and VR experiences are 1 gig plus, if you don't have a large hard drive to begin with for your main drive, which I don't, because it's an SSD, I don't really want to waste all of it. I have a gaming drive, which is a large 2 terabyte. That's a mixed SSD slash hard drive or mechanical drive. And that's where I put stuff. And the fact that I didn't have that option, and they said, well, it's for security, which people think is baloney because SteamOS has been allowing you to reassign your stuff for some time. I think that's baloney. So that's really my major complaint right now. And I will be unhappy if the DK2 stops working. I will be happy if they allow me to start moving content to a different drive. So those are my 2 complaints at this point. Okay, so that pretty much, I think, ends it. Oh, we have some magic leaps. I'm going to show this video and see what you think there. Huh? This is the latest, and I think it's funny. Magic Leap always seems to come out with...
We have not yet reached the desired arrangement with Jabba the Hutt regarding Captain Solo's death. An army of stormtroopers is searching for us. It can only be a matter of time before we are blasted into spare parts. I told you it was dangerous here. We have not yet completed the mission. How did we get into this mess? I really don't know.
Are you there, Mike?
I'm here. Hello. 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 Hello.
There you are.
Okay, man. Today's not a good day. I had more sleep than I needed. So I was turning down my own volume. So you did see the teaser trailer, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. A lot of people have some concerns about Magic Leap. What are they? They have some legal issues right now. I guess 2 of the employees went off to do some other stuff with robots, and now Magic Leap has sued them. That's something in the news. I do think that was kind of cool. I did scrutinize the video a little bit, and I did see that there is some nuances there that you could tell that it wasn't like actual objects. But one thing I did notice, and if you scrutinize it, one of the things that the Magic Leap will be different than things like the what is it called, the HoloLens or this other product we've covered, is the ability to focus. And they do this because if you remember, we talked about the light valve system where they actually have multiple layers, and because of this they can determine depth and create a focus parameter. And I did notice that being used when you were looking at, like, they focused in and out of R2-D2. And some people think that the technology and the algorithms required in order to know where these cameras are looking and where you're focused, which means they probably have something looking at your eyes as well, is an extremely integral portion of this and adds to the complexity. So not only are you able to channel multiple levels of depth information through these different light wave guide systems we talked about earlier, because it's like a matrix, you also have the ability to figure out what you are looking at and then ensuring that the object is in focus of what you're looking at. And then you have to have a highly accurate tracking system to make sure that they lock in. So if you go back to that little video, which I'll jump back to, and then so notice there's an occlusion here. There's a table, but the R2-D2 is seen behind it. That's an important thing, and we talked about it before with occipital. These are important things that have to be taken into consideration. It has to know physically where the table is and to be able to occlude an object behind it. It also needs to know where the floor is. It needs to know where other objects are. So they must be doing something similar to it. But again, you're talking a lot of horsepower here, and how are they able to do that? You're actually showing up twice on my screen.
Yeah. I don't know. It kicked me out. It kicked me out. Yeah.
I'm thinking, oh, there's 2 of you now. So I thought that was kind of cool, and yeah, it looks like they're making some progress. But what's it going to take to drive this? What is it going to look like? And like we talked about last week, if it's going to look like anything like that head, the front part of an alien skull, I would be a little. That would be kind of weird to wear. I was hoping to be more like glasses, but maybe that's not going to happen. So the fact is that they've teamed up with the ILM lab. It's going to be pretty cool, so we should see some interesting content as time goes on. Okay, well, that's about it. Let's cover what's in the news in the 3D printing area, and then I guess we can scoot off into another world. I do have an announcement to identify at the end. So let's see what we got going on in June. Basically, everything that we covered last week. So if you're not in this country, you're in Italy, Germany, Germany, South Korea, and India, you'll see some of the other shows. We don't actually have anything going on, or I haven't seen anything in the U.S. The big show was Maker Faire, and I haven't seen anything else. I don't think we'll probably see anything until August and September again, right? Yeah. So we have a Maker Faire in Milwaukee. All right, so in the Road to VR calendar, what do we got going on? More Casino VR. I'm going to have to try that one someday. And then this Gunter's Universe. But other than that, we have Mobile World Congress going on at the end of June. And I don't know what's going on in July. I think most of the shows are gone, right? So hopefully there'll be some new interesting hardware announcements from Apple's in August, as well as a couple of other things. But for the most part, all of our developer shows and main shows are out of the way. I do know from my own person that MedX will be going on, and I might be a speaker, but that's not until September. So on that note, I was thinking, since we're not going to have any more shows, Chris, that we would take a vacation and kind of shut down the show for maybe a month or two. What do you think?
Yeah, I could use a little break, refresh, and we'll come back in a couple months and maybe a month or two, and come back with our batteries recharged. Summertime.
Okay, well, on that note, audience, so as you said, we will not be back next week. Probably won't be back for the entire month of, or the remaining month of June and July, so maybe back in August. Chris, what do you think?
August it is.
Okay, so who do we have to thank today, Chris?
Well, we have to thank, obviously, 3dears.org, Road to VR, OSVR, Razer, It Sees 3D, MonoPrice, Gizmodo, Reddit, UC Davis, MX Labs, Magically, PC Mag, Redwood Data, Stanford, Hackaday.
That's about it. And Chris.
And YouTube. And
Wait
Mike.
a minute. You
And
have an
our-
item. We forgot about your unit, the Print Whisperer.
Oh, the Print Whisperer. Okay. I'll leave you on this. The thing I learned this week is NinjaFlex all the things, man. I love NinjaFlex. It's such a cool material, and it really comes in handy, whether it's gaskets or my favorite application this week is I had this dry erase board that I've been using that 3M Extreme tape, double-sided tape, super strong stuff. But if you have a warp in a surface that you're trying to mount, it'll peel itself off and it'll kind of fall. And I had this dry erase board, huge one, mounted on the door, and it kept falling off. I think you can kind of see it in the background here. And it just kept falling off. So I printed these little corner hinge, or these little corner brackets out of NinjaFlex. So they kind of put a little bit of pressure, but they also have like a little bit of give. So they mount really good. They take that 3M double-sided tape really good. And I've been using it to make mounting brackets for like anything I want to mount. The beauty of that stuff is like you can mount stuff and you don't have to penetrate a wall. So like I have a stainless steel kitchen and a door that I wanted to mount stuff on. And I didn't have to drill any holes in there that I have to worry about patching, or like a door. You don't really want to drill holes in your door unless it's like for a peephole or something, you know? But so use NinjaFlex. It'll keep everything California earthquake friendly. hopefully. So I found for mounting brackets, NinjaFlex is the bomb. It's great stuff because it's really strong too. So like if you're mounting, whether it's like a clothes hook, it works really, really well. So love the NinjaFlex. Try it out if you haven't already tried it out. It can be. You definitely want to make sure that it's compatible with your printer. So make sure it's compatible with your printer. I know Bowden's have a little bit of hard time printing it, but find out if people have experimented with it on your particular printer and printed it successfully. I use a PEI build sheet on the Lulzbot Mini, and I put a little bit of the Yoo-hoo glue on there, some of that PVA glue, and it sticks like a charm, releases like a charm. It's back there printing another bracket for my sink right now, so I don't have to punch holes in my stainless steel.
So essentially you build these little brackets that you push the, let's say the whiteboard behind you into?
Yeah. So it has like a relief for the board, but then it mounts flush onto the wall. So it's incredible stuff. I mean, it's so strong when it has the 3M tape on it, and it's got a nice give, so it can kind of contour to whatever you're putting it on. So it's really actually a really great solution for mounting brackets. So
well, as you know, I've used your services a number of times with NinjaFlex for creating flexible plastic objects that emulate rubber. And on that note, I'm going to segue, because I forgot mine. This is the latest iteration of the Neodi VR Uplay. It now has a new bracket that fits on your phone.
Whoa!
So that you can make a headset out of it. So keep in mind, this has lenses very similar to the Oculus Rift, but gives you that experience on a smartphone. And these little blinders help keep light. One of the things that's not shown here, and here's another view of it from above. So essentially, I had to design my own, you want to call it, bracket for the phones, because the ones that you can buy now are cheap. They use springs and they aren't wide enough. And plus, if you have a Nexus phone, they put all their switches in the middle here. Like the iPhone and the Samsungs are off to one side. So I had to develop a system here so that it has two, what do you want to call it, arms on each side that extend across, and then you have the bracket that uses standard GoPro type connections. So even though you'll be included with something that can use a GoPro headband, which will be included, you can pretty much use any type of GoPro mounting system. So you could mount this with a suction cup on your forehead if you wanted. I don't know, that would be kind of funky. But more importantly, I developed this with a screw adjustment so that you could tighten it down so it would be locked in place. So that it doesn't wiggle. Because, the last thing you want was a VR device on your screen, on your front of your face, wiggling as you're moving. So I tried to develop a system that allowed you to put something together, throw in your pocket, but still have a pretty great immersive experience. So that's the direction I'm going. So there you go.
Awesome. Thanks version. Cool.
Yeah. So, and again, thank you. He's the one that actually helped make the eye cups for me. So if you wanted a more immersive and block out ambient, that can be plugged in. Let me jump back to this picture. If you see there's this inset groove here, it just pops right into that. Takes a little bit of force, but it keeps it in place. And then you have really, it blocks out all the ambient light and gives you a really extremely immersive experience. And hopefully you can buy just the piece here around $30, and then like $10 for the eye cups, another $15 for the phone bracket. So you can buy it piecemeal or all together to have a pocketable VR experience. Can't do that with your Oculus Rift, can you? Okay. All right, Chris, say goodbye.
All right, everybody. We'll see you in a month. We'll see you in the first week of August. Have a great summer. Thanks for tuning in. All Things 3D.
Bye, everybody. Bye.